There are so many Pokemon ranking videos out there, and I typically enjoy them all. I grew up with the game, starting with Pokemon Silver on my Game Boy Color, and every year for my birthday, I would wish for Pokemon to become real, until I eventually grew up and stopped doing that. Seriously guys, I don't do that anymore, okay? I'm mature. But when Pokemon Go came out, I felt like a little kid again. I was running around catching Pidgeys and Rattatas, and on rare occasions, some Pidgeotos and Rattatas. But for the longest time, I would debate with my friends and myself which starter trios were truly the best. So, given all the Pokemon ranking videos out there and Pokemon Sword and Shield's recent release, I figured I'd give it a shot myself and rank all 8 generations of starter trios, as I'm sure you all care so much about my thoughts. So I ranked all the trios on 3 main components. 1, their design, which I gave 50% weight. 2, their usefulness in the game, which I gave 30% weight. And then 3, their names, origins, and themes, which I gave 20% weight. I won't walk you through that entire process, as it did take me about a week to do. I mean, it's like ranking your children or your friends. Oh, by the way, it's Albert, Lizzie, and then Johnny. Anyways, I don't want to ramble too much, so let's just dive right in. Starting at the bottom, I have Generation 5. Now, the Unova region is beautiful and is inhabited by some pretty awesomely designed Pokemon, and some trashy ones. I'm just kidding. I love you, Trubbish. The game's story is one of the best, and it brought some cool new features and quality of life improvements. And as for the starter Pokemon, they are a cute bunch. And while their usefulness varies, their themes and design are pretty cool, being heavily inspired by Eastern generals and nobles. However, ones that hold it back for me are Samurot's design, the creativeness within Snivy's line, and Tepig resulting in yet another firefighting starter. Starting with Oshawott, it is an adorable Pokemon, and it's the one that I decided to start my first journey of Unova with in Pokemon Black. I loved Duott's design and its signature move Razor Shell, and while I like the idea of bringing in a samurai aesthetic into a starter Pokemon, it's weird they chose to do that with a cute little otter line. In fact, Samurott looks like it abandoned the otter inspiration altogether. Now, Snivy has the opposite issue for me. Superior is one of the coolest looking starter final evolutions. I think we can all agree on that. However, while Snivy is cute, its middle stage, Servine, feels so uninspired. I mean, it just looks like Snivy's older brother. Second stage evolutions are the most important for me, as they are the ones you typically spend the first half of the game with, and they act as the bridge between the cute starter and the badass third stage. I've always been more fascinated with the second stage evolutions for those reasons, which is why Servine has always, sort of bugged me. Lastly, with Tepig's issue, it has to compete with the other firefighting starters which came in the 2 generations right before Generation 5. And while Pignite is cool and Emboar is a strong addition to anyone's team, the typing has always felt lazy to me, and it put Emboar in a bad light. All in all, Pokemon Black and White were great games filled with an amazing story and beautiful world, but as for the starters, they come in dead last. Now again, I don't hate them, I just think the other gens had a bigger wow factor. Next up on the list is one I wish were higher because I love the game and the region oh so very much, Generation 7. The Alola region is beautiful, being based on the Hawaii Islands, and it's filled with Pokemon that I really dug. The island challenges were actually tougher ones, and while I was getting tired of the Kanto Pokemon starting to become overused, I loved the idea of Alolan forms for certain Generation 1 Pokemon. It brought a breath of fresh air to the series, and it added more depth to the world in my opinion. But now for the starter Pokemon. They have less issues than Generation 5 in my opinion, and I actually really did like the starters when I first saw them and started playing for myself. But when the choice is too obvious for me, that tells me that there isn't enough balance amongst the starters, at least design-wise. Rowlet was the obvious choice for me and for a lot of other people. I typically love the grass starters more, and I mean a cute little owl that evolves into an awesome grass ghost archer? Sign me up! Now Litten is super cool, I love its design, but Torracat, while having a cool name, has similar issues as Servine does for me. It just looks like an older Litten. It doesn't really do the job of a bridge between Litten and Incineroar. Now, I like his design, I just think it could have been a bit better because the previous generations have shown me that it could have been. Lastly, Poplio, a super cute water starter that evolves into an elegant water fairy circus seal. A great idea in theory that just came out a little lackluster in the end. Primarina looks pretty great, but from what I've heard, she isn't that helpful in the actual gameplay, although to be fair, I haven't judged this for myself yet because I haven't played a run with her. The middle stage Brionne is probably my favorite second stage starter in Gen 7, but comparing it to the likes of Croconaw and Frogadier, it doesn't stand a chance. I like Gen 7, but Decidueye and Incineroar aren't enough to carry these 9 Pokemon higher on my list. Close ahead of Gen 7 is the newest one out there, Generation 8. Now, obviously, I haven't had as much time with this gen as I have with the others. In fact, I'm only 60 to 70% through the game. But as for the starters, I think I have enough info to rank them, especially design-wise, so I'll mainly stick to that. Right off the bat, I want to mention that I love the idea of a UK-based region, and from what I've heard, the UK fans are pretty happy with the game as well, aside from the Dexit issue and Game Freak lying about the animations and graphics, but that's a whole other topic. The Pokemon designs are fairly hit or miss for me, but the ones that do hit, such as Corviknight, Dreadnought, and Sentai Scorch, they're just absolutely amazing. I really think that if Game Freak were to spend more time on each game rather than trying to crunch one out every year, the ones we'd get would be truly remarkable. So I'm holding out hope for future gens. Now, given it's a UK-based region, I thought the theme they settled on for the starters was perfect, which is the main reason why I have it above Generation 7. I mean, come on, a circus theme for a Hawaii-based game? No. Gen 8 uses an entertainment theme for its starters. We have the James Bond spy-like water starter Inteleon, the sports-based fire starter Cinderace, and then they have the band member grass starter Rillaboom, who's rocking the drums. These are a perfect fit for a UK entertainment theme. Their first stage forms are some of my favorite of all time, especially Grookey and Scorbunny, and Scorbunny's second stage evolution, Raboot, is awesome and is third only to Combuskin and Monferno for me. Thwackey is pretty cool, although he suffers from a lousy name, and Drizzile is not my fave, but seeing him in the game made me appreciate him a bit more, to be fair. All in all, fairly good designs all around, except Cinderace. That's the one that keeps this gen back for me. It just looks like a guy in a furry suit. Honestly, I'm hoping for less humanoid Firestarter next gen. And since the Firestarters are based on Chinese zodiac animals, might I suggest an ox-themed Firestarter named Charcoal? Get it? It's like charcoal plus bowl. Alright, never mind. Next up, I have Generation 2. Pokemon Silver, Gold, and Crystal were awesome games, and their remakes, Soul Silver and Heart Gold, only improved upon them. I think it's safe to say they're the fan favorites amongst all the main series games. As for the starters, they are a solid addition to the franchise. To sum them up pretty quickly, they're simple. I don't think Game Freak was trying to blow its fanbase away, but instead pleased them with decent additions after Generation 1. If the starters had a common theme, it would probably be ancient creatures, and I think these starters encapsulate that theme fairly well. The Totodile line is one of my favorites of all time, Totodile being a cute yet rough crocodile-based water starter, Croconaw building upon him perfectly and being my spirit Pokemon, and Feraligatr is one awesome-looking third stage starter. Chikorita's line is simple but still cool and adorable, and Cyndaquil is a decent enough rendition of a rat/badger/porcupine type Pokemon. It evolves into Quilava, which is okay but nothing special in my book, but its final evolution Typhlosion is one of the coolest looking third stage fire starters to this day. Where this gen lacks is the usefulness in its starters. Meganium is notorious for having pretty lackluster stats, and picking Chikorita puts the game in hard mode. Totodile isn't really super helpful in the game either, making Cyndaquil the obvious pick. But what keeps them above Gens 5, 7, and 8 for me is their names. I just love the names they chose. They're not super simple and obvious like Thwackey or Litten, where they just mash two simple words together. They actually sound really unique and sound like they took some time to come up with. Looking at Chikorita's line alone, Chikorita is based off of chicory, which is a type of plant. Bayleaf is a corruption of bay leaf, a type of herb, and Meganium is a combination of Mega and Geranium, which is the genus name for 422 different species of plants, commonly referred to as cranesbills. They actually put a lot of thought into these names, and while their usefulness is amongst the worst, their simple yet cool designs, coupled with thoughtful names and origins, put this gen towards the middle for me. Starting off the better half of this list is Generation 6. I had mixed feelings about this gen at first, and it wasn't until this past year where I actually started to appreciate them fully. I remember when they announced the final evolutions, and people were pretty underwhelmed for the most part. Chestnut straight up looked like a Digimon to me, and Delphox just seemed boring. It seemed like we had another obvious pick with Froakie, Frogadier, and Greninja. However, I eventually realized that they were based on common RPG classes. You have the tanky Juggernaut, the powerful Mage, and the DPS Stealthy Thief. And it made me want to look at them a bit more. So I decided to play another run of Pokemon Y, this time using Chestnut, and seeing him in action made me appreciate him a lot more. When I play other games with friends, I usually play the tank, so I was actually able to connect with Chestnut after playing with him. And when I understood Delphox's origin as a wizard/mage type, I wasn't bothered by her final design anymore either. It actually made sense, and these origins and their naming conventions were the saving grace for Gen 6. They were in the middle for design and usefulness amongst the other gens, but in second place overall for their names and common theme. In third place, I have Generation 3. I know, this is a lot of people's favorite, so don't get mad, I love them a ton too. My top 3 were all number 1 in one of the 3 categories, but the average for Gen 3 was just slightly lower than the top 2 on this list. The only thing that held them back was the common theme amongst their starter trio. It didn't really have one. You could argue that it's just traditional evolution, but to me that's not really a theme, that's kind of the whole point of Pokemon in general. Gen 3 came in second for me with its designs being tied with Generation 1. They came in first for their usefulness, as you're not really punished for picking a certain starter. They all bring something to the table that will help you with some part of the game. However, for their theme and naming conventions, they came in fourth after Gen 1, 4, and 6. Now again, these are just my opinions, and I've been wrong before, but while I love their names, the fact that there isn't a theme that ties them together and solidifies that certain component for this generation is what inevitably put them in third place. Now again, I love this generation. I probably haven't played a specific generation more than Gen 3's Sapphire, Ruby, Emerald, and then Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. Whenever I look at these Pokemon, it's pure nostalgia for me. Treecko is tied for my favorite starter of all time, and Mudkip and Torchic all have giant fan bases as well. Gen 3 is as good as a Pokemon game can be, in my opinion. But as for the starter trios, I think these next two were just a bit more perfect. My favorite starter trio is Generation 4, with Generation 1 being my runner-up. Generation 1 was a perfect introduction to the Pokemon world. It gave us the arguably best starter of all time, Bulbasaur, the iconic Charmander and his third stage starter Charizard, and the beloved water turtle Squirtle and his badass final form Blastoise. These designs are near perfect. There's something unique about each line, and they have my favorite names of any starter trio. Now you might be thinking, well, if they're so perfect, then how could Gen 4 be any better? Well, that's a great question, and I'm glad I thought of it. Generation 1 started the idea of unique themes for not only the trio, but for the types as well. As I mentioned earlier, the fire types are inspired by the Chinese zodiac animals, but the grass and water starters also share a unique theme as well. The grass starters represent evolutionary change or growth. Look at how Bulbasaur's evolution is mainly focused on the plant on his back. Chikorita's is focused on the plants on its head or neck. Snivy becomes a bigger and badder predator as he evolves. And Treecko starts out as a gecko, a type of lizard, but then evolves into a more raptor-like creature. Sometimes it's more subtle than others, but there's definitely a shared theme amongst the grass starters. The water's theme is much simpler in that they are all semi-aquatic creatures. They all have the ability to go in the water or on land, and this makes them more versatile and a bigger threat. Taking all of this into account, I think Generation 4 encapsulates the Pokemon starter themes perfectly. Turtwig, which is tied for my favorite starter of all time with Treecko, starts off as a simple and adorable tortoise-like Pokemon, and as it evolves, its shrubbery grows and then becomes the continent Pokemon Torterra, which is highly inspired by Tribal Society's legend of the Great Turtle. Chimchar is an awesome execution of a monkey fire starter. As he evolves, his fighting spirit grows as well, and his final form, Infernape, is reminiscent of the Sun Wukong, or the Monkey King from Chinese mythology. And last but not least, we get the adorable penguin water starter Piplup. As Piplup evolves, his exterior hardens until he ends up as a Pokemon version of the Emperor Penguin. There's nothing I don't love about Empoleon. Empoleon has a dual typing of steel, which gives him his rough exterior. He's ready for any dinner party with his suit coat of fur, and his trident on top shows off his royalty status. The name Empoleon comes from emperor, such as the leader status, but also the penguin, and Napoleon, the infamous French leader. Thus, Empoleon is simultaneously reminiscent of European society and the legendary god of the seas, Poseidon, thus Empoleon's trident. This trio is just so dang perfect. Their designs, their names, and their theme of civilizations and legends. But there's still one more thing that highlights this generation. They all have a dual typing. That's right, no favoritism this time relative to its predecessors. And all these dual typings allow them to counter the starter that they are traditionally weak against. Now typically the water starter will beat the fire, fire beats grass, grass beats water, but with the dual typings they gave Empoleon, Infernape, and Torterra, they have a built-in counter to even the playing field. Infernape has the dual typing of fighting, which is super effective against steel, which is the second typing for Empoleon. And Torterra has the dual typing of ground, which is super effective against fire. Now Empoleon's is less obvious, but it's actually pretty cool. Torterra is by definition double weak to ice-type moves, which Empoleon can learn via TM. Now yes, they could have made a Piplup's line evolve into a water-ice type, which would have made more sense with this counter dual typing mechanism. but I actually like that they chose to go with Steel instead. Steel type in general is a really beefy type that's resistant to a lot of other types. And we've already had plenty of Water Ice type Pokemon in the past, so the Water Steel type felt fresh and it went in line with Piplup's direction of evolution. Putting this all together, it was fairly easy for me to see how Gen 4 has my favorite starter trio. Guys, I love the Pokemon games. Yes, some more than others, but they are all a huge part of my childhood and helped me evolve into the person that I am today. I'm thankful we have these games and the opportunity to discuss something we all have in common, our love for Pokemon. So before you go, I'd love to hear your rankings of the 8 trios. What's great about all this is that few rankings are ever the same, but our love for the games remains untouched. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button, and if you aren't subscribed to the channel already, we talk about a lot of different things here, from Marvel to Pokemon, from Pixar to music, and we'd love to have you stick around. Thanks everybody, I'll see you next time.